What happens when a man who has everything, a man who architects his life with the precision of a hawk, decides to risk it all for a moment of pleasure? We're not talking about a simple mistake. We're talking about a titan of industry, a man who commands empires with a single phone call, walking into the most exclusive spa in Beverly Hills with his beautiful young mistress on his arm. He believes he's invisible, untouchable. But in a world of glass walls and glossy pages, secrets have a way of finding the light. What he's about to find on the cover of a magazine in that temple of tranquility won't just ruin his day. It will detonate his entire existence. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of spectacular, calculated revenge. The air inside the Elysian Spire in Beverly Hills was different. It wasn't just filtered or temperature-controlled. It was monetized, rarefied, and sold by the hour. It smelled of eucalyptus white tea and the kind of wealth that makes a $1,000 an hour private suite seem like a reasonable expense. Lucas Thorne breathed it in a satisfied smile playing on his lips. This was his world, a world he had built brick by digital brick through his company Aura AI, a titan in the world of predictive analytics. On his arm, Chloe Summers was a vision of curated perfection. 24 years old, with eyes the color of a Maldivian sea and a body sculpted by Pilates and ambition, she was the human equivalent of the Rolls-Royce Cullinan he'd just handed the valet. She was sleek, expensive, and a thrilling departure from his other life, the life of boardroom presentations, philanthropic galas, and his wife Isabella. Lucas, this place is divine. Chloe whispered, her voice a breathy purr, as they were led through a corridor of cascading water walls and glowing Himalayan salt bricks. It's like heaven. Heaven has a price tag, sweetheart, Lucas replied, his voice a low, confident rumble. He squeezed her hand, a gesture that was both affectionate and possessive. He enjoyed being her benefactor, her gateway to a world she could only post about on Instagram. It reinforced his sense of power. His life was a masterclass in compartmentalization. There was Lucas, the CEO, the ruthless innovator, who had cornered the market on knowing what people wanted before they did. Then there was Lucas, the husband, the public partner to Isabella Rossi Thorne, a woman whose quiet grace and old money lineage provided the perfect stable backdrop to his new money empire. And then there was this Lucas, the one who existed only in 5-star hotels and private jet cabins with Chloe. He saw no conflict, only a well-managed portfolio of personal assets. Their private suite, the Celestial, was an opulent sanctuary, a private steam room, a hydrotherapy pool infused with minerals, and a pair of plush massage tables sat waiting. Champagne on ice, a platter of exotic fruits, and the promise of 4 hours of uninterrupted bliss. A staff member clad in crisp white linen bowed slightly. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Summers, your therapists will be with you shortly. Please make yourselves comfortable. Can I bring you anything to read? We have the latest periodicals." Chloe, already slipping out of her dress, giggled. "I don't think we'll be doing much reading." Lucas smirked. "Actually," he said to the attendant, "bring me the new Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Might as well keep an eye on the market." It was a habit, a compulsion. Even in paradise, the king had to survey his kingdom. The attendant returned moments later, placing the requested magazines on a polished mahogany table next to the champagne bucket. Lucas, now in a plush Bulgari robe, didn't give them a second glance. His attention was on Chloe, on the intoxicating simplicity of their arrangement. She wanted luxury. He wanted an escape. It was a clean transaction. An hour passed in a haze of steam champagne and whispered nothings. Their couple's massage was a symphony of expert hands and aromatic oils. Lucas felt the tension of a multi-billion-dollar hostile takeover negotiation melt from his shoulders. He was utterly blissfully in control. After the massage, wrapped in fresh robes and feeling boneless, they sat by the small private pool sipping champagne. Chloe was scrolling through her phone, no doubt crafting the perfect envy-inducing post that vaguely alluded to her current location without giving away any compromising details. Lucas, feeling a familiar itch of ambition, reached for the magazines. He picked up the Wall Street Journal first, scanning the headlines. A rival company was stumbling. Good. A market trend was shifting in Aura AI's favor. Excellent. He put the paper down, a predator's satisfaction settling in his gut. He then casually picked up the fresh, glossy copy of Forbes. He was expecting the usual cover, some aging tech billionaire he despised, or a fresh-faced startup founder he'd eventually acquire and dismantle. But the face staring back at him was not a rival. It was not a stranger. It was his wife. The blood drained from his face, a cold shock wave that seemed to solidify the champagne in his veins into shards of ice. It was Isabella. But not the Isabella he knew, the one who curated art exhibits and organized charity balls. This was a different turn. Woman. Her dark hair, usually styled in a soft, elegant chignon, was pulled back in a severe, powerful ponytail. Her gaze, directed straight at the camera, was not one of quiet grace, but of formidable, unshakable confidence. She was visibly pregnant, one hand resting protectively, possessively on her rounded stomach, their child, and the headline emblazoned in bold white letters across her chest was a gunshot in the silent room. The Phoenix of Silicon Valley. Isabella Rossi's Terrigen is about to remake the world, and she's doing it by betting against husband, Lucas Thorne's entire empire. The magazine slipped from his numb fingers, landing on the wet marble topple floor with a soft slap. The sound echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of his mind. Lucas. What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost, Chloe said, looking up from her phone. Her brow furrowed with concern. He couldn't speak. He could only stare at the image on the floor. His pregnant wife, on the cover of Forbes, the founder of a company he had never heard of. A company positioned as a direct rival to his own. He picked up the magazine, his hands trembling for the first time in years. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the text in a blur of panic and disbelief. The article was a masterpiece of narrative journalism. It painted Isabella as a visionary, a sleeping giant who had been quietly building a revolutionary green tech company right under his nose. Terrigen Innovations. It detailed her securing of massive European Union green energy grants, her poaching of top-tier talent names. He recognized people who worked for him, and a recent colossal deal with the automotive giant Volkswagen for next-generation battery technology. A deal Aura AI's industrial division had been aggressively pursuing for 6 months. The article quoted her. For too long, the tech industry has been dominated by a single philosophy: growth at all costs data. As the new oil and a blatant disregard for ethical consequence, Isabella was quoted as saying. Terrigen is founded on a different principle. We believe in sustainable growth, in empowering people, not just profiling them. It's about building a future you'd want your child to live in. Your child. The words were a knife twisting in his gut. The world tilted on its axis. The serene, monetized air of the spa suddenly felt suffocating. The scent of eucalyptus was cloying, nauseating. His entire, perfectly compartmentalized life had just been firebombed, and the arsonist was the one person he believed was his most stable, predictable asset. Lucas Chloe's voice was sharper now. She got up and came over to him, peering at the magazine in his shaking hands. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropping. "Oh my God, is that your wife?" The spell was broken. The quiet betrayal was now a public declaration of war, broadcast on the front page of the world's most influential business magazine. The king was not just naked, he was a fool, luxuriating with his mistress in a 5-star spa, while his queen was checkmating him on the global stage. The Elysian Spire was no longer a sanctuary. It was the scene of the crime, his crime, and the first casualty was his illusion of control. The silence in the celestial suite was now thick with a toxic mixture of shock and Chloe's rising panic. For Lucas, the world had narrowed to the glossy page in his hand. Every word in the Forbes article was a meticulously placed explosive charge detonating the foundations of his reality. Terragen Innovations. The name itself was a mockery, a reference to the earth he so callously mined for data. Lucas say something, Chloe's voice trembled. The luxurious fantasy had evaporated, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of her position. She wasn't a partner. She was a complication, a piece of evidence. Lucas finally moved. His actions were jerky, stripped of their usual fluid confidence. He snatched his Brioni suit from the hanger, his hands fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. "Get dressed," he snapped the words cold and hard. "What's happening? I don't understand. How could she?" "I said get dressed," he roared, a primal sound of a cornered animal. He wasn't looking at her, but through her. She was just noise in the symphony of his catastrophe. He grabbed his phone, his thumb swiping frantically across the screen. First, he called his office. He dialed the private line to his chief operating officer, a man named Gerald. "Gerald, what the hell is going on, Forbes?" "My wife, Terragen, talk to me, now." The voice on the other end was strained, hesitant. "Lucas, we didn't know how to reach you. It just dropped this morning. The board is in an emergency session. The stock is already taking a hit in pre-market trading. Why wasn't I told about this Volkswagen deal? My industrial division has been working on that for months. They went dark on us about 3 weeks ago." Lucas Gerald stammered. "We thought they were just playing hardball. We never saw this coming." "Terragen, they came out of nowhere. Their tech is apparently years ahead of ours. It's cleaner, more efficient, and ethically sourced. That's the narrative they're pushing. Ethically sourced." It was another dagger. Aura AI was perpetually fighting lawsuits over its aggressive data acquisition methods, and the talent Lucas barked, pacing the suite like a swoonged tiger. "Dr. Aris Thorne. He's my lead battery scientist." A pause. "He resigned 2 months ago." Lucas, citing personal reasons. We now see he's listed as Terragen's CTO. Another name from the article. Another betrayal. He disconnected the call without a goodbye, his mind racing. This wasn't a spontaneous act of revenge. This was a coup. Months of planning. Meticulous, calculated, and executed with devastating precision. While he was booking secret holidays with Chloe, Isabella had been building an empire. He dialed his lawyer, Arthur Finch, a man whose morality was as flexible as his exorbitant hourly rate. "Arthur. Code red." "I've seen it." Lucas Finch's voice was grim. I'm already in the office. We need to formulate a response, a press release, a counter-narrative. Forget the narrative, Lucas snarled. I want to know how she did it. The money. Where did she get the capital to build this thing? Her family trust. I'd know. From what I can gather in the last hour. Lucas Finch said, his tone low. The initial seed funding came from the sale of her art collection, the one you dismissed as a hobby. The Monet, the Degas. She sold them privately 6 months ago, quietly, for over $100 million. Lucas stopped pacing. The blood in his veins turned to ice. He remembered her talking about liquidating some pieces, saying she wanted to invest in something more meaningful. He had patted her on the head, figuratively speaking, and told her to have fun. And the rest, Lucas? This is the genius of it, Finch continued. She leveraged her family's name, the Rossi reputation for stability, to secure those EU grants. But the masterstroke, she used Aura AI's own predictive models against us. What are you talking about? She must have had access. She analyzed the market sectors Aura was targeting for acquisition and identified the gaps. She predicted our move on Volkswagen based on our own internal data. She didn't just outbid us, Lucas. She used our own playbook to anticipate our every move and cut us off at the knees. The phone felt heavy in his hand. He looked at the wreckage of their champagne and fruit platter at Chloe, who was now dressed and staring at him with wide, fearful eyes. He had built an empire on predicting human behavior, and he had failed to predict the one person sleeping next to him. Flashback, 6 months ago. The scene was their cavernous, minimalist mansion in Atherton. It was late. Isabella sat in the dark of the living room, a single glass of water on the table in front of her. She was waiting. Lucas had called to say he was stuck in a late-night board meeting that had run over. An unfortunate but necessary evil of his position, he'd said. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a piece of spyware she had paid a discreet cybersecurity expert a small fortune to install on Lucas's devices a week prior. A decision that had made her feel sick to her stomach, but one she knew she had to make. For weeks, the small inconsistencies had been piling up. The vague business trips, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers on his suit jacket, the emotional distance that had grown into a chasm. The notification was an alert for a credit card charge, not the corporate card, but a private one he thought she didn't know about. A charge for $2,000 at a restaurant named Cielo, time-stamped 30 minutes ago, not a boardroom. And then a second alert, a charge at the St. Regis Hotel. The confirmation didn't bring the explosion of rage she had expected. It was a cold, quiet certainty that settled deep in her bones. The grief was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. She clutched her stomach where the first secret stirrings of their child were beginning. This betrayal wasn't just against her. It was against this new life. She cried then silent, gut-wrenching tears for the man she thought she had married and the future she thought they would build. But as the dawn light began to creep through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the grief began to cool, hardening into something else. Resolve. She would not be a victim. She would not be the humiliated wife in a messy public divorce, fighting for scraps of an empire she had helped build through her support and social maneuvering. The Rossis did not crumble. They endured. They strategized. She thought about Lucas's arrogance, his belief that her world of art and philanthropy was trivial. She thought about his obsession with Aura AI, his God's eye view of the world. And in the depths of her despair, an idea began to form. A terrifying, audacious idea. She wouldn't just leave him. She would beat him at his own game. The next day, she called David Chen, Dr. Aris Thorne from the Forbes article. He was a brilliant scientist, a man with a conscience who she knew was growing increasingly disillusioned with Lucas's ethics. She met him at a small, unassuming coffee shop, far from the prying eyes of Silicon Valley. She laid it all out, her plan for a new company, a company built on the sustainable technologies David was passionate about, a company that would be the antithesis of Aura AI. David was skeptical at first. Isabella, with all due respect, Lucas would crush us. He has endless resources. He has resources, but he also has arrogance. Isabella said, her voice steady. That's his weakness. He won't see me coming. And I have an advantage you don't know about. She leaned forward. I have access to the mind of my enemy. I live with it. I know how he thinks, how he plans. And more importantly, I think I can get access to Aura's own predictive models. She explained her theory, how she could use his own technology to map out his future strategies and build a company that would intercept his every move. It was a gambit of incredible risk, but as David saw the fire in her eyes, the cold, calculated determination that had replaced her gentle demeanor, he began to believe. He was in. Terragen Innovations was born not in a boardroom, but over a cup of coffee, forged in the fires of betrayal. Present day. The Elysian Spire. Back in the spa suite, the reality of this long con crashed down on Lucas. He had been played, masterfully. He had underestimated her at every turn, viewing her as a decorative part of his life, while she was secretly waging a war against him. We need to go, he said, his voice flat. He threw a wad of cash on the table, more than enough to cover the bill and the uneaten fruit. He strode out of the suite without a backward glance at Chloe. She hurried after him, stumbling in her heels. Lucas, where are we going? What are you going to do? He stopped in the middle of the serene, waterfalled corridor and turned to face her. His eyes were devoid of any of the warmth or affection she had known. They were the eyes of Lucas Thorne, the CEO. Cold, calculating, appraising. We are not going anywhere. He said the word we, dripping with derision. I am going to deal with this. You are going to take a taxi, go back to your apartment, and you are going to stay quiet. You don't call me. You don't text me. You don't post a goddamn thing. Do you understand? The cruelty in his tone was a physical blow. But what about us? She asked, her voice small. Lucas let out a short, harsh laugh. Us. There is no us. There is my empire, which is on fire, and you who are standing next to me holding a can of gasoline, you are a liability. So you are going to disappear until I tell you otherwise. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway of the spa that was supposed to have been their slice of heaven. The dream was over. She was just collateral damage in a war she hadn't even known was being fought. Lucas Thorne was unraveling, and he was cutting loose anything and anyone that might weigh him down. While Lucas was imploding in a Beverly Hills spa, Isabella Rossi Thorne was holding court in a warehouse. It wasn't the sterile glass and steel monolith of Aura AI's campus. This was a renovated brick and beam building in an industrial district of San Francisco, buzzing with a different kind of energy. It was the energy of creation, not just acquisition. Whiteboards were covered in complex equations. 3D printers hummed, and teams of engineers, many of whom were Lucas's former top employees, were clustered around prototypes, arguing and laughing with a passion he hadn't seen in his own company for years. This was the headquarters of TerraGen Innovations, her empire. Isabella stood at a large central table, a blueprint for a new solid-state battery array spread before her. David Chen stood beside her, pointing to a specific power cell configuration. Despite being 7 months pregnant, she radiated a vitality that filled the room. She wore a simple but elegant black maternity dress, her bearing regal. She was not a woman scorned. She was a leader in her element. The efficiency gains here are undeniable. David said his excitement palpable. By restructuring the ionic pathways, we're not just increasing capacity by 30%, we're cutting the cobalt dependency by half. This is the kill shot to Aura's entire industrial battery division. It's not about killing. David. Isabella corrected him gently, though her eyes held a glint of steel. It's about making them obsolete. We're offering a better way. Her phone vibrated on the table. It was a notification from her head of security. He's on his way. ETA 15 minutes. Unannounced. Isabella's calm expression didn't flicker. He's coming, she said to David. David's face hardened. Are you sure you want to do this here? We can have security escort him out, she said, placing a hand on her stomach. I want him to see it. I want him to stand in the middle of everything he dismissed and everything he underestimated. This is where it happens, in my world, not his. She turned to her assistant. Sarah, please have a pot of chamomile tea and a bottle of San Pellegrino brought to the main conference room, and have our legal counsel join us on video link in 10 minutes. She walked toward the glass-walled conference room that overlooked the main floor, her stride measured and confident. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of 6 months of sleepless nights, relentless work, and iron-willed focus. She had rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times in her mind. Lucas stormed into the TerraGen building like a thundercloud. He bypassed the bewildered receptionist, his eyes scanning the cavernous space with a mixture of fury and disbelief. He saw the faces of people who used to work for him, people he paid millions, who now averted their gaze or looked back at him with a cool defiance. The entire scene was an affront, a vibrant, thriving testament to his failure. He spotted her in the conference room and strode towards it, pushing the door open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Isabella. The name was an accusation. She was sitting at the head of a long, reclaimed wood table, a cup of tea before her. She looked up at him, her expression serene. The contrast between his barely contained rage and her profound calm was stark. Lucas, she replied, her voice even. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Please close the door. Sit down. Sit down, he spat. You detonate a bomb under my life, my company, and you offer me a seat. What is this? What have you done? I've built something, she said, simply gesturing to the bustling floor below them. Something that matters. Something I can be proud to pass on to our child. Our child? He scoffed, the sound ugly. You use our child as a prop on the cover of a magazine for a corporate hit job. After everything I've given you, the life, the homes, the status, Isabella let him vent her fingers, steepled before her. She let the storm of his ego break against her wall of composure. When he finally paused, breathless with fury, she spoke. The life you gave me, Lucas, was a gilded cage. The status you gave me was as your beautiful, compliant wife, an accessory. And while I was playing that part, you were otherwise engaged. with Chloe Summers at the St. Regis, and the Peninsula in Hong Kong, and the villa in Lake Como. I have dates, receipts, travel manifests. Shall I go on? The colour drained from Lucas's face. He had assumed this was about business, about ambition. He hadn't truly comprehended that she knew everything. You think this is about revenge for your sordid little affair? Isabella continued, her voice dropping to a lower, more dangerous register. Oh, Lucas, your infidelity was the catalyst. Yes. It was the insult that woke me up. But this, she gestured around her again. This is not revenge. This is a correction. A market correction. You used me, he whispered, the realization dawning. I learned from you, she corrected him. I learned that information is power. And while you were busy buying data from millions of strangers, you never bothered to understand the person sleeping next to you. So I used the tools you love so much. I installed a keylogger on your network, a simple piece of software. It's amazing what you can find in late-night emails to offshore shell corporations and encrypted chats with your more morally flexible board members. On the large screen at the end of the room, the face of Isabella's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Albright, appeared. Ms. Albright has a summary for you, Lucas, Isabella said. Mr. Thorne. The lawyer began, her voice crisp and professional. Over the past 6 months, we have compiled a significant dossier. It details a pattern of insider trading related to the Apex Pharma acquisition wire fraud, connected to 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands, used to hide losses, and a conspiracy to manipulate market prices by intentionally releasing a flawed security patch, which you then shorted. The evidence is compelling. The SEC would be very interested. The DOJ, even more so. Lucas finally slumped into a chair, his body suddenly devoid of strength. He was staring at total annihilation. Not just a corporate defeat, but financial ruin and prison time. What do you want? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. His empire was ashes, and she was holding the matchbook. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. The Queen's Gambit was on the board, and it was time for the final move. I want a quiet divorce, she said. No public fight, no drama. You will walk away, and the official story will be one of amicable separation and your desire to pursue new, smaller ventures. And he knew there was more. And she said, her voice dropping the final hammer, you will cede your majority stake in Aura AI. All 51% of your voting shares. You will transfer them to a holding company controlled by TerraGen. He stared at her, uncomprehending. You want to take my company? I want to absorb it, she clarified, her tone devoid of emotion. Aura's predictive technology is powerful, but it's poisoned by your methods. Subsumed into TerraGen. Under my ethical oversight, its power can be used for good. Predicting climate shifts, optimizing food distribution, modeling sustainable urban growth. I'm not taking your company, Lucas. I'm redeeming it, and if I say no, if I fight you. He challenged, a last flicker of his old defiance. Isabella's gaze was unwavering. If you say no, then Ms. Albright forwards her entire file to the Southern District of New York. Your assets will be frozen by lunch tomorrow. You'll be a front-page Sundal by evening, and Chloe Summers will be subpoenaed as a witness. Your life as you know it will cease to exist. You will lose everything, and you will go to prison. Your child will know you only through photos and cautionary tales. She stood up, walking to the glass wall and looking down at her new world. So you have a choice, Lucas, she said, not looking at him. Sign the papers and you get to walk away with your dignity, or what's left of it, and enough of your personal wealth to live comfortably. Or you can refuse, and I will burn your kingdom to the ground and salt the earth behind it. The choice is yours. You have 24 hours. She left the conference room without another word, leaving him alone with the lawyer on the screen and the crushing absolute reality of his defeat. He had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly destroyed. The Queen had taken the king, and the game was over. The 24 hours Isabella granted Lucas were not a reprieve. They were a torture chamber. He spent the first 12 barricaded inside Arthur Finch's war room, a place that had once been the strategic heart of his triumphs, now transformed into the morgue for his empire. The air, usually electric with ambition, was stale with the stench of defeat. Finch, a man who had made a living turning predators into victims and scandals into footnotes, looked ashen. The fight had gone out of him. It's not just a case, Lucas. It's a symphony, Finch said, his voice raspy. He gestured to a massive screen, displaying a complex web of flowcharts and documents. Albright didn't just find evidence. She's composed a masterpiece of your ruin. He brought up the first exhibit, the Apex Pharma acquisition. Remember Daniel Cortland, Finch asked. The board member you forced out last year. He's their star witness. He's provided a sworn affidavit, complete with transcripts from a burner phone you used, detailing how you deliberately shorted Apex stock based on non-public information about their failed clinical trial information you acquired illegally. Lucas stared at the transcript, his own words arrogant and dismissive, damning him from the past. He has no proof. It's my word against a disgruntled employee. Not anymore, Finch countered, clicking to the next slide. It showed a series of offshore transactions, a digital breadcrumb trail leading from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands to a trust controlled by Lucas's estranged half-brother. Isabella's forensic accounting team is top tier. They unraveled it. They can prove you paid Cortland for his silence and then cut him out. They're not just painting you as a criminal, Lucas. They're painting you as a cheap one. He moved on relentlessly. The wire fraud. The shell company's Prosperity Holdings, Oceanic Ventures, names Lucas had chosen in a fit of hubris, now laid bare as simple instruments of theft. Finch showed how he had funneled funds meant for R&D into these accounts to inflate Aura's quarterly earnings reports, a move that had netted him hundreds of millions in performance bonuses. Lucas felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. He had always believed himself to be insulated, protected by layers of legal complexity and the sheer power of his name. He had never imagined that the person with the will to unravel it all was sleeping in his own house. And this, Finch said, his voice dropping, is the kill shot. He switched the screen to a simulation of news headlines and social media feeds. Forbes Tech. Titan. Lucas Thorne accused of massive fraud by pregnant wife. Bloomberg. Aura AI stock plummets. Amid SEC investigation into CEO's criminal conduct. Twitter. Thorne fraud trends worldwide. Memes of Isabella as a avenging angel and Lucas as a cartoon villain go viral. This isn't a battle we can win in court. Lucas Finch explained his professional veneer, cracking to reveal genuine alarm. Because the trial won't happen in court. It'll happen on CNN, on Twitter, in every newspaper from here to Tokyo. She's not just threatening you with prison. She's threatening you with permanent global humiliation. You won't just be a felon, you'll be a punchline. They'll teach classes about your hubris at Harvard Business School. Isabella, the pregnant visionary, the wronged wife who built a better world, versus you, the cheating, lying monster. Who do you think the world will root for? Lucas sank into a leather chair, the fight draining out of him like blood from a mortal wound. Offer her money, he croaked a last desperate gambit. A settlement. Half of everything. More. Finch shook his head sadly. You're still not getting it. She doesn't want your money. She used 100 million of her own as starting capital. This was never about cash. It was about cleansing. She wants your company, your legacy. She wants to take the engine you built for greed and repurpose it for good. It's a moral crusade, and you're the dragon she needs to slay. A settlement would be a compromise, and she is done compromising. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a king who had just been informed that his reign was over. His castle was forfeit, and his only remaining choice was the manner of his execution. Checkmate. Finch was right. The only choice left was how to fall on his sword. As Finch left him to his thoughts, Lucas's phone buzzed on the table. It was the 18th call from Chloe. Her name on the screen ignited a volatile fuse within him. In a world where he had just been rendered completely powerless, she was the one person over whom he still held absolute authority. He was drowning, and the urge to pull someone down with him to feel the sensation of control one last time was an irresistible poison. He answered his voice a chilling, flat calm. "What do you want, Chloe Lucas?" Thank God her voice was a frantic mess of tears and panic. "I've been so scared. I'm seeing this everywhere. What's happening? Please just tell me what to do." "What you're going to do," Lucas said, savoring the cruel deliberation of each word, "is listen very carefully. The game is over. Our arrangement has ceased to be." "Arrangement?" She whimpered the word, twisting in her throat. "I thought you said you loved me." A harsh, ugly laugh escaped Lucas's lips. "Love? Oh, sweetheart, you were a high-end subscription service. A luxury good. You were a line item on an expense report I kept hidden from my wife, and right now my assets are being liquidated. That includes you." He could hear her sharp intake of breath, a sob catching in her chest. "How can you be so cruel? Cruelty is a luxury for the powerful, and I am simply exercising my last remaining perk." He retorted the words, dripping with venom. "Let me be crystal clear so there is no confusion. The apartment, the car, the clothes, the allowance, it's all gone. You were a pleasant distraction, but you've become a rather inconvenient piece of evidence. So you will pack your things. You will go back to whatever life you had before you met me, and you will forget my name. Are we understood?" He didn't wait for an answer. He ended the call, tossing the phone onto the polished table. A fleeting, shameful surge of power coursed through him, but it vanished almost instantly, leaving behind a hollow, echoing emptiness. He hadn't just been cruel. He had been pathetic. He had taken all the rage and humiliation he felt toward Isabella and aimed it at the easiest, most defenseless target. The dragon slain by the queen had turned and devoured a field mouse. It was the most contemptible act of his life, and he knew it. The next morning, Lucas Thorne put on a grey Brioni suit that now hung loosely on his frame. He felt like an actor in a play about his own life. The meeting was in a neutral law firm in a downtown skyscraper, a soulless space of glass and brushed steel. Isabella was already there, seated at the head of a long table. She was flanked by Ms. Albright. Isabella's pregnancy was more pronounced now, and she possessed a monumental calm, a gravitational center of serenity in a room thick with tension. He, in contrast, felt like a ghost. He sat down opposite her, avoiding her gaze. The documents were a mountain, a thick white stack of paper that represented the sum total of his life's work. The signing began. Finch would slide a page in front of him, pointing to the line. The rustle of paper was the only sound. Signature 1, ceding his role as chairman and CEO of Aura AI. He felt a physical jolt, as if a limb had been amputated. Signature 2, authorizing the transfer of his 51% controlling shares to Terrigen's holding company. The pen scratched loudly in the silence. He was signing away his name, his power, his identity. Signature 3, a non-disclosure agreement of brutal permanent totality. He was agreeing to be silent, to be erased. With every stroke of the pen, he felt himself diminishing. He finally forced himself to look up at her. He had expected to see triumph in her eyes, or hatred, or satisfaction. He saw none of it. He saw only a quiet, sad finality. The look a doctor gives when they have done everything they can, but the patient cannot be saved. When the last page was signed, he pushed the pen away. It was over. He stood up, his body feeling heavy and old. There were no words to say. He had built an empire, and he had just signed its death certificate and handed it to its conqueror. As he turned to walk out of the room, out of her life, out of his own, her voice soft but clear cut through the silence. "Lucas." He stopped, his back still to her. "The baby," she said. He could feel her composure, her strength radiating across the room. "It's a girl. I'm going to name her Sophia." He flinched, the news a bittersweet dagger. "After she's born," Isabella continued, her voice unwavering, "if you decide you want to be a father to her, a real father, not just a benefactor, the path will be open. But it will be on my terms, and you will have to earn every single step. That life you will have to build from nothing." He couldn't speak. He couldn't turn around. The offer wasn't an act of grace. It was the ultimate challenge. She wasn't just taking his kingdom. She was showing him the long, arduous path to rebuilding his own soul. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and walked out of the door, not looking back. The latch clicked shut behind him, a sound that definitively and irrevocably separated Lucas Thorne, the Titan, from whatever man was left. 3 months later, the dust from the corporate earthquake had not so much settled as it had been reformed into a new landscape. The name Lucas Thorne, once a synonym for ruthless innovation, was now a whisper, a cautionary tale told in hushed tones in Silicon Valley boardrooms. In his place, a new name reigned: Isabella Rossi. She was no longer a wife or a socialite. The media had crowned her with titles like the conscientious CEO and the Phoenix of Tech, a visionary who had not only foreseen the future, but had built it on a foundation of ethics. The monolithic skyscraper in San Francisco that once bore the cold, sterile logo of Aura AI was now the Terrigen Global Center, its name a promise of renewal etched against the sky. Inside the transformation was more than just cosmetic. The atmosphere of fear and brutal competition that had defined Aura's culture had been replaced by a palpable buzz of collaborative energy. Whiteboards, once used for mapping out corporate takeovers, were now filled with diagrams for sustainable agriculture and clean water initiatives. Isabella had surgically excised the soul of the old company and transplanted a new one. In the penthouse office, a space Lucas had designed as a monument to his own ego. Isabella stood not in a power suit, but in a simple cashmere dress, rocking a bassinet gently with her foot. The panoramic view of the San Francisco Bay stretched before her, but her attention was focused on the tiny, perfect life sleeping within arm's reach. Sophia, her daughter, her reason. The initial reports from the Sahel are promising, Madam CEO, a voice said from the large monitor on her desk. It was a UN delegate, his face beaming from Geneva. Terrigen's atmospheric water generators are exceeding projections. You've given 2 villages a stable source of fresh water for the first time in a generation. That's excellent news, Martin, Isabella replied, her voice calm and steady, yet warmed by the genuine satisfaction. Let's begin deployment for Phase 2. I want the algorithm focused on identifying the next 10 most critical locations. Right away, he said. The world is watching what you're doing, Isabella. It's a new dawn. The call ended, and the office fell silent, save for the soft breathing of the baby. David Chen entered, holding a tablet, his face alight with the passion of a scientist finally unleashed. The Sahara reforestation models are... It's almost poetic, he began, his voice low. We're using the old Aura prediction engine, the one Lucas used to predict market crashes for profit, to model symbiotic planting patterns. It's predicting how acacia trees can provide shade for desert dates, which in turn enrich the soil for hardy grasses. We're not just planting trees, Isabella. We're using his own weapon to resurrect a dead ecosystem. The irony is staggering. Isabella looked from the complex models on David's tablet to her sleeping daughter. It was never about irony, David. It was about purpose. He built a tool to dominate the world. We're using it to heal the world. That's the legacy I want for her. She gently stroked Sophia's cheek. The cost of this victory had been immense, the death of her marriage, the painful necessity of her ruthless gambit. But in these moments, looking at the tangible good they were creating and the peaceful face of her child, she knew with every fiber of her being that she had made the right choice. Meanwhile, in a different world of grey skies and misty rain, the fallen king was living out his exile. Lucas Thorne resided in a starkly modern house of glass and steel overlooking the Puget Sound in Seattle. To most it would be a mansion. To him it was a minimalist prison, a constant quiet reminder of the Atherton estate and the global empire he had lost. He had chosen the name Phoenix Energy for his new small-scale startup, a desperate, ironic attempt to convince himself he could rise from his own ashes. His days were a humiliating litany of his new reality. He no longer had a team of analysts. He built his own financial models on a laptop. He no longer had a chauffeur. He drove his own Tesla to meetings with skeptical venture capitalists who looked at him with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. He was damaged goods. The brilliant, aggressive mind was still there, but it was tainted by the stink of his hubris and spectacular downfall. The tech is solid, Lucas, one investor told him that afternoon. But you are a massive liability. How do we know you won't get played by your own CTO again? The question was a casual, brutal jab that left him speechless. He returned to his silent, empty house as dusk fell. The weekly email had arrived. The subject line was always the same, Sophia. It came from Isabella's personal assistant, a professional but clear barrier between him and her. His hand trembled slightly as he clicked it open. This week it was a short video. Sophia, propped up in a chair, was staring at a mobile of planets, her dark eyes wide with wonder, before breaking into a gurgling, toothless smile. Lucas watched it 10 times. 20. He leaned forward, his finger tracing the outline of her face on the cold screen of his monitor. This tiny human was his daughter. A stranger. A person he was biologically connected to but emotionally light years away from. In her face he saw Isabella's resolve, her intelligence. He prayed she had none of his own flaws. He thought of Isabella's final words to him in that law office. The path will be open, but it will be on my terms, and you will have to earn it. He was starting to understand what that meant. Earning it wasn't about building another company or making another $1 billion. It was about dismantling the man he had been, piece by painful piece, and seeing if there was anything worthy left to rebuild. The road ahead was terrifyingly long, and he was taking the first uncertain steps entirely alone. Thousands of miles away in the quiet stacks of an Ohio community college library, Chloe Summers was taking her own first steps. The shame of being the millionaire's mistress had followed her home a scarlet letter in the digital age. But after weeks of hiding, she had emerged not defiant, but determined. She enrolled in classes, worked a part-time job at a coffee shop, and was slowly, painstakingly building a life that was entirely her own. During a study break, she scrolled through Instagram, a habit she was trying to break. A post caught her eye. It was from a girl no older than 19, posing on the hood of a new Maserati, tagging a real estate mogul in his 50s. The caption was a gushing tribute to his generosity. Chloe felt a familiar, sickening lurch in her stomach. She saw her own naive reflection in the girl's sparkling eyes. Her first instinct was to keep scrolling to mind her own business. It wasn't her problem. But then she remembered the cold, dismissive tone in Lucas's voice. As he cut her loose, the feeling of being disposable of her entire world, vanishing with a single phone call. Her fingers flew across the screen, composing a direct message. "Hi," she wrote. "You don't know me, and this is going to sound weird, but I just saw your post. I was once in a situation that looked a lot like yours. The gifts are amazing. The travel is intoxicating, and he makes you feel like the absolute center of the universe. I get it. But please, from someone who has been there, don't let his world become your entire world. He makes you feel like a queen, but you're a guest in his kingdom. Use this time and this opportunity to build your own. Finish your degree. Start a business. Save your own money. Make sure that if the day comes when he decides you're no longer convenient, you have a foundation to stand on that is completely, unshakably your own. Have your own parachute, because I promise you they won't hesitate to cut your cord." She hit send, her heart pounding. It wasn't bitter. It was a warning, an act of solidarity. It was the advice she so desperately wished someone had given her. In that moment, Chloe Summers was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, turning her scars into a map for someone else. 3 people once linked by a web of love, deceit, and ambition were now on 3 separate paths. One was building a new world. One was atoning for destroying the old one. And one was learning to navigate it on her own terms. The story hadn't ended with a checkmate. It had ended with a new game for everyone. A new dawn rising on 3 very different horizons. So there you have it. A story that started with a quiet betrayal in a world of unimaginable luxury and ended with the spectacular rise of a new empire. It's a chilling reminder that the person you underestimate the most might just be the one holding the checkmate move. Isabella Rossi didn't just divorce her husband. She dismantled his legacy and built her own on its ruins, not out of pure vengeance, but with a vision for a better future. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What sleeping giants do we all have in our lives, or even within ourselves, just waiting for the right moment to awaken? This story shows that the ultimate power isn't about controlling others, but about mastering yourself and rewriting your own narrative, even when it feels like the story has already been written for you. If this story of strategy, betrayal, and ultimate triumph captivated you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who loves a story of epic revenge and empowerment. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the most incredible real-life dramas you've ever heard. Thank you for listening.